Welcome to Game Changers with Molly Fletcher, where we take you behind the scenes with peak performers to learn what makes them tick and discover how you can apply their lessons to your life. I'm your host, Molly Fletcher. Today's guest is an explorer, adventurer, and mountaineer, not to mention an amazing speaker and New York Times best-selling author. Alison Levine has completed the Adventure Grand Slam, climbing the highest peaks on each continent and skiing to both poles. It's an accomplishment fewer than 30 people in the world can claim. In addition to tackling some of the most extreme environments in the outdoors, Alison has plenty of business accolades to go along with her sense of adventure. After earning her MBA from Duke University, she worked on Wall Street at Goldman Sachs and then served as Deputy Finance Director for Arnold Schwarzenegger in his successful bid to become Governor of California. In today's episode, Alison talks about her most memorable expeditions, why she left the corporate world to pursue this passion, and what she's learned about leadership, teamwork, and risk-taking by taking on the world's highest peaks. Alison's book is called On the Edge, and you can follow her on Twitter at Levine_Alison. So Alison Levine, thank you for jumping on. You are such an amazing woman, and it was so cool when I had the chance to meet you a couple years ago, and of course read your book, and you're just an all-around badass, really, is the bottom line. So thanks for coming on.
Back at you, Molly, back at you.
So tell me this, how did you sort of first get into climbing, and kind of how did it evolve for you?
So when I was younger, I was just very intrigued by the early, the stories of the early Arctic and Antarctic explorers and the early mountaineers. So I'd read books and I'd watch documentary films. And eventually the light bulb went on in my head, and I thought, okay, if I want to know what it's like to be Reinhold Messner and drag a 150-pound sled across 600 miles of Antarctic ice, then I should go do it instead of just reading about it. And if I want to know what it's like to be these mountaineers and these explorers that are going to these big mountain ranges, then I should go to the big mountain ranges instead of just watching documentary films about them. And if these other guys are getting out there and doing that stuff, then what's stopping me from going out and doing it, and why not me? So it was just kind of asking the question, why not? And that's how it started.
Oh, that's awesome. But so many people ask themselves that question, but maybe they don't necessarily go do it, right?
They never take action, correct. And sometimes it takes some type of catalyst event in your life. So for me, I was born with a hole in my heart that got bigger as I got older. And I had my second heart surgery when I turned 30. And so it wasn't until after that I had that sort of light bulb moment. So sometimes it does take something to trigger it.
Sure.
And so for me, that was it, sort of finding a new state of good health that prompted me to sort of act on my ambitions and my ideas and my dreams.
Well, and you left a really successful corporate career. I mean, you had a big job to do something totally out of the box, right? Which is become a mountaineer. Why did you do that exactly? Was it the heart surgery thing that really unlocked that?
Well, it's easier to leave a big job that you don't like that much and that you're not very good at. And that was sort of my situation. So I had spent 11 years in the healthcare industry in pharmaceutical and medical devices, and I worked in sales and marketing and business development, and I loved that. I ended up going back to graduate school for an MBA. I got out of business school. I totally changed direction and went into finance. And I worked at Goldman Sachs. I got a summer internship with Goldman Sachs because I wanted to do something that was totally outside of my comfort zone. And I had no experience in finance or accounting. So I thought if I want to get my feet wet, I should go to Wall Street. If I'm going to go to Wall Street, I should try to go to a big firm. And so I went to Goldman, and I ended up getting an offer there at the end of the summer to go work there full time. And I never thought I would end up working in a job like that. It didn't really match my skill sets very well. But again, I wanted to try something that would allow me to really stretch and push myself. So I worked there for just a couple of years, and I'm telling you, I was terrible at the job. I I actually really loved the firm. I just didn't love the job itself. I worked in their wealth management division.
Okay.
And it just wasn't a good fit for me. And there's a lot of it involves sales, and I don't really love sales that much. And so it was easier for me. I was only there for a couple of years. It was easy to leave because I wasn't very good at the job. And I
bet
didn't
you
like
were
that
really
much, even though I
good.
liked the firm.
I bet you were really good. I mean, just knowing you. So what advice do you give people when they want to follow their passion and they're scared to do it?
Well, everybody's really scared to do it, right? And I hear people a lot of the time say, oh, I wish I had the guts to do this. I wish I had the courage to do this. And everybody has the guts. Everybody has the courage. It's just a matter of finding that voice in your head. And for me, it went back to one of actually the very first mountain I ever climbed when I went to Mount Kilimanjaro. And it was the first time I'd ever been at altitude. And even though it's not a technical climb, you really feel the altitude because it's over 19,000 feet. And I remember being up toward the summit and feeling really out of breath and feeling like, I can't do this. I can't do this. Like it feels uncomfortable. It feels kind of scary. It feels like it's just too much for me. But then I just stopped for a second and I had this voice in my head that said, you know what, just take one more step. So I just took my one more step. And then I thought, okay, well, if I just took that step, I could take one more after that. Okay, well, I could take one more step after that. And I just kept taking one step. So going forward in other situations, whether it was on a climb or in the business world or something else where I had to do something that felt overwhelming, I could summon up that voice that said, you know what, just take one step.
Wow.
Just do it. Like if you don't take one step, you're never going anywhere.
Right.
You're just going to stay right where you are. So I feel like everybody has that voice in their head. It's just a matter of finding it. And once you've heard it once, you know it's always there and you can summon it up when you need it. So you got to really find that voice. You have to really listen to it. And you've got to make sure that that voice is louder than the voice that is telling you to stay still.
That it suffocates the negative voice or the voice that's holding you back.
Exactly.
You know, speaking of one step at a time, you know, and your badass self, our listeners need to know is that you are 5'4", and you are teeny tiny, right? I mean, you're just so little, and it's not exactly what you think when you think about somebody that's dragging 100 and whatever pound sled behind them climbing up a mountain. And then you talk briefly about your heart condition. And which puts you at, I think, a little bit more risk for frostbite, right? Well,
yeah, it's not the heart condition, though. I have something called Raynaud's disease, which is a neurological disease that causes the arteries, the nerves in my fingers and toes to clamp down on arteries, and that's what puts me at risk for frostbite.
Golly. So you're 5'4", you've got this heart issue, you've got, I can't even pronounce what you just said, sort of
Raynaud's disease,
Raynaud's disease, right? And so, you know, how have you dealt with all of those challenges and still had the level of success that you've had as a mountaineer?
Well, what it is I had to come to the realization that I probably was never going to be the best, fastest, strongest climber, or the best, fastest, strongest cross-country skier across Antarctica or to the North Pole or wherever I was skiing. So what I realized is I wasn't going to be the best, fastest, strongest, but I learned that you don't have to be the best, the fastest, and the strongest. You just have to be relentless about putting one foot in front of the other. That's really all it takes. And I think oftentimes people are so focused on being the best or being the fastest or being the strongest. And you don't have to be those things. You just have to be relentless. Just put one foot in front of the other and you'll get there. And who cares if you're not the fastest or the first one?
Sure.
You know, just get there. Get there in your way, the way that works for you.
Sure.
And, you know, for me, I'm probably always going to be slower and weaker and struggle a little bit more. And I might need some help from my bigger, stronger teammates when it comes to carrying a lot of weight. But I know that even though I'm smaller, there are other ways that I can contribute to a team in different ways that aren't necessarily about physical strength. Maybe I'm the one that always has a smile on my face, that has a word of encouragement, you know, and has the positive attitude. And don't discount the value of being that person, the person with the smile, the person with the best attitude, the person who's always encouraging people when times really get difficult.
Well, and that's the thing. It's amazing because these climbs there's such a team component. I mean, you and I have talked about that, which is amazing. And, it was just interesting for me personally to learn about. You see how the best teams function inside of life and death situations, right? I mean, you've been in those situations. What do you think is the key to a successful team under those kinds of circumstances that, people listening are on a team at their corporate offices or internally? What makes those teams work, the best work?
So I think what differentiates a team, like a high-performing team, from just a group of people doing something at the same time, because
right.
People often think that a group of people doing something at the same time is a team, but that's just a group of people doing something at the same time. It's different than being a team. I think what makes you a team, a high-performing team, is when the people in the group care as much about helping the people around them achieve their goal as they care about achieving it themselves. And when people think other people care about them, they're more inclined to work harder and put in a hell of a lot more effort. If you think no one cares, you're like, oh, why should I bust my ass for this guy? Why should I bust my ass for this woman? Why should I bust my ass for this team?
Sure.
Nobody cares.
Sure.
Right? But when you feel like people care and they're putting in the same amount of effort, the other thing is that every member of a team has to empower themselves to think and act like a leader and not leave leadership to one person, because if that person's not around, then the team's going to fall apart. So you need everybody to empower themselves to think and act like leaders. And you have to remember that as a leader, right, which everybody on a team is a leader, you can never expect the people on your team to be willing to endure anything that you aren't willing to endure. So you can't ask someone else on your team to do something that you would not be willing to do yourself. So that's part of it too, is just feeling like everybody's got skin in the game. Everybody's out there in the trenches. Everybody's willing to roll up their sleeves and get their hands dirty. Everybody has, some skin in the game. And I think that's what helps people perform at a higher level together.
That's, I haven't heard it quite said that way. I love that. That's awesome. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, as an adventurer, right? You probably, I would imagine, and you tell the story, I know, but you always don't make it to the top of every expedition, right? So
no,
right. So what do you learn from, what maybe others or some might interpret as a quote unquote failed attempt?
I think a mistake that people often make when they are climbing a big mountain, whether it's literal or figurative, they think that getting to the top of the mountain is their goal, right? We got to get to the top. We're doing this climb. We put so much time and effort in. We got a big corporate sponsor that funded the trip. We've got all kinds of money put into this. We got to get to the top. And what people forget is that the top of a mountain is never the goal. Top is merely the halfway point, because you have to have enough energy, get yourself to the top and get yourself back down safely. So while it's very difficult to turn back from a summit when you've put so much blood, sweat, and tears into a climb, look, climbing Mount Everest takes 2 months and a lot of training, and you land a big corporate sponsor like I did. Ford sponsored our team, and you get to within a couple hundred feet from the top, and you have to turn back in bad weather because a storm comes in, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, 2 months on this mountain, and we missed it by a couple hundred feet. But that's the right decision, because Mount Everest is it's just a pile of rock and ice. You can always go back. But if you do something dumb up there, you may not have the opportunity to go back. So you always have to remember that keeping yourself and your team out of harm's way is the most important thing, right? Come back alive, come back with all your fingers and toes. Mountain's always going to be there. Look, I had an opportunity to go back 8 years later and make it to the summit. And what I realized when I made it 8 years later is that, standing on top of a mountain doesn't really change anything. What changes things are the lessons you learn along the way, when you're fighting to get up there, and then what you're going to do with that information to be better going forward.
One of the, no question, I couldn't agree with you more. I think sometimes people, though, get so locked in on what they're trying to achieve that they forget that the byproduct of the process is who you become as a product of the chase, as one of my friends Jim says, is to me So huge. So you've probably learned a ton about yourself throughout this process. What are some of the things that you've learned about you as you've climbed and summited some and not all?
Well, I've really learned that, and this is something that's changed in me over the years because I didn't used to be this way, but I really learned the importance of failure tolerance. And you kind of touched on it earlier when you mentioned it, sometimes you fail, sometimes you do get to the top. And I used to really let that kind of define me. Oh yeah, I'm just the team captain of the first American women's Everest expedition that didn't make it. We had all this, it was hard because we had all this media coverage, right? And 450 media outlets followed our climb, and then we didn't make it. And so we were this high-profile failure, and you go from being celebrated in the media to being the butt of Jay Leno's opening monologue joke. And how does that feel? So I really used to beat myself up about that and just feel like, oh, I don't want to talk about these things, these expeditions where I didn't make it. Because I felt like it was some kind of personal failure. And what I've learned about myself is that I need to be more failure tolerant and encourage myself to get out there and try and fail because of what you learn from it.
Right.
So that has really been something that's changed me. And the other thing is that I look at myself as someone, that I'm responsible. It's my responsibility to go out and take risks in order to help other people down the road. So I used to just always, feel sorry for myself and wallow in pity when I didn't achieve something and, oh my God, this is terrible and blah, blah, blah. But now I look at it as, hey, it's my job to get out there and try really freaking hard things because somebody else is going to follow my footsteps down the road and they're going to benefit from this experience, even if it didn't go the way I wanted it to. So it's, I've really changed by looking at not just how my failures affect me, but how can my failures benefit other people that will come after me? Because, most people who know a little something about the history of Mount Everest will know the names Redmond Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, right? First guys to ever summit the mountain. But there were dozens of climbers and failed before those who made it to the top, who had the beta, the 411 from all those previous climbers. And so maybe if those other guys hadn't tried and failed first, Redmond Hillary and Tenzing Norgay would never have made it to the summit.
Right.
So that's just something that's changed in me as I look at it as look, taking risks isn't just about what you do. It's about something that could help someone else down the road.
That is so cool. I love that mindset. That is awesome. You serve on the advisory board for Coach K, right, at Duke University.
I do.
Center on Leadership and Excellence. I know, and it's just amazing because that's where you went to grad school, right? You smarty pants?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, good. I was over there at Michigan State, crushing it, baby, where we play a little basketball too, by the way. But you've spent,
I heard that somewhere.
and I know you have a relationship with Coach K. In fact, I think he's endorsed your book, right? Didn't he write the foreword or something?
Yeah, he wrote the foreword for my book. Yeah.
So you have a close relationship. You've spent time around a guy who's obviously an incredible basketball coach, an incredible leader. What do you think makes him such a great leader?
Well, there's so many things, oh my gosh, that I think make him a great leader. But one thing that kind of stood out to me about him, and this was something that Shane Battier, who played at Duke, played in the NBA, was Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, an amazing basketball player.
Sure.
Played for the Pistons. He was great. So I was very struck one time at a meeting for the Coach K Center on Leadership and Ethics where Battier was talking about when Coach K was recruiting him to play at Duke. And he was, this kid was being recruited by a gazillion fabulous schools, great basketball schools, great academic schools. And he said, people were promising him all kinds of things if he, came play for them. And he said that what stood out when Coach K recruited him is that he said, I'm not going to promise you any playing time. He said, if you come to Duke, not going to promise you any playing time. But what I will promise you is that you will be coached like you've never been coached.
Wow.
And I thought that was such a great statement with all the coaches promising him playing time, right?
Sure.
But Shane Battier saw the value in having somebody really coach him and help him become a better player. And I think that's something that Coach K does so well is he helps these young players really become men on the court. And sometimes, it's not the easiest lessons that they have to learn. And Shane Battier is the first one to say, look, Coach K, he's not a perfect human being. He doesn't always get it right. He said, but what brought him to Duke was the opportunity to be coached, to really be coached and have someone help him grow rather than just like basically kissing his ass and promising him the world. And I think that's what makes Coach K so special.
Wow, that's a really cool story. I love that story. One of the things also that I think about when I think about what you've done as a climber is that you set out on these expeditions with enormous amounts of uncertainty. You prepare a ton, physically, mentally, I'm sure, emotionally, et cetera. But there's uncertainty. There's weather, right? I mean, there's, you've got other people, teammates. There's all kinds of uncertainty. How do you think that translates to people in the business world in an effort for them to ensure that, because there's lots of uncertainty in the world that we're in today, tons of change, tons of uncertainty, and that's so scary for people. How have you navigated that uncertainty and come out the other side with such great success?
Well, I learned how important it is to be able to ditch your plan and take action based on what is going on at the time. And look, it's so important to have a plan, right? Planning helps keep us organized, keeps us on track. Like, you got to have a plan.
Sure.
But what you have to remember is that when you're in environments that are very dynamic, where there's a lot of uncertainty, where things are constantly shifting and changing, you cannot be hell-bent on sticking to that plan. You have to be much more focused on executing based on what's going on at the time, rather than based on what you wrote in that plan. Because whatever plan you came up with, last year, last month, last week, even that morning, your plan is outdated as soon as it's finished.
Sure.
Right? As soon as it's finished, your plan is outdated. So forget about being like, oh, this is my plan, I got to stick to it. No, you don't have to stick to it. You need to take action based on what's going on at the time.
That's awesome. And so, do you have a story about that, maybe, when you found yourself with a little bit of adversity in a, I'm sure there's 100 of them, right? With tough situations. And
yeah, so many stories about that. It happens on almost every climb where you have a plan to either move up to a specific camp, move up to the next higher camp, or even go for the summit. Look, this is the day we're going to go for the summit because the route's not going to be very crowded and the weather's supposed to be good. And you get out and you start heading there, and then storm clouds start to come in. So you have to totally abandon your plan. Right? You can't be like, oh, well, we're still going to the summit because this was the plan. This was the plan we had, that we were going to do it today. You got to figure out how to just deal with the situation and adjust and improvise. Improvise is a huge part of it. And that means you got to turn around and go in a different direction. And that's what you have to do. And it happens all the time in the mountains. The most well-laid plans have to be ditched at the last minute because of completely uncontrollable factors.
Sure. How do you refuel yourself? I mean, you go hard, whether you're on the mountain or not, in your work. How do you take care of you? I mean, you take such good care of yourself. You're so healthy. How do you do that?
Well, I feel like I'm not all that healthy. I feel like I'm constantly sleep deprived and on planes too much, and I don't always eat well or whatever. But you have to, when you have an opportunity, you have to take advantage of that time to sort of refuel, regroup, and recenter yourself. And for me, this is going to sound like a really basic thing, but for me, it's my dog.
Oh, good.
So I have a 100-pound black lab that I just love so much. And I just feel like whatever stress I have in my life, when I get home and I'm spending time with my dog, whether we're just laying on the couch or we're going out for a hike together, whatever it is, I feel like that is what sort of brings me back to center and lets me just take a deep breath and relax and realize that there are things in life that I can't control that I'm going to have to let go of. And all in all, whatever stress is going on, life is pretty good. I'm still waking up every day and my heart's still beating. I have, even if I had some kind of crap day one day, like you have a new opportunity every single day when you wake up. You have a brand new opportunity.
Totally.
So you can either dwell on this stuff that haunted you the day before, or you can say, you know what, I'm going to get after it today. And I just think it's so hard to look at cute big lab in the eyes and think you're going to have a bad day. Like, you can't. It's impossible. Like, when you see it, everybody should have a dog. I'm telling you, if there's anybody out there on the fence, get a dog. Get a dog today.
Alison, it's so funny because I'm sitting here petting our golden doodle as we're having this podcast, because I do these at my house. And I got to tell you, I mean, I was like, all my girls wanted dogs, my kids. And I was like, you got to be joking me. That is the last thing I need to do is deal with somebody else to take care of and feed and all that. And I thought, I don't have time for this. And I'm telling you, I would never look back. It is the greatest move I've ever made. I wish I could, I need, you and I both fly so much. That's what we need to do is make them our service dogs, so we can take them on the airplanes with us like everybody else today.
And I mean, I did not grow up with dogs.
Okay.
So I never knew dog love until about 7.5 years ago when I met my husband. Trooper was his dog when we met. And at first I was like, oh my God, this dog, it slobbers, it sheds, it's disgusting. And now I'm just covered in dog hair and dog slobber all the time. And I don't care. I love it. I mean, I love this dog so much. Dog love is real. It's a real love.
Yeah. No, it is. It is. Now, should I make sure your husband doesn't get a hold of this podcast and realize that you refuel from your dog, not him? We need to make sure that we're careful with that. Oh, I'm just kidding. I love
knows.
it.
He knows. He always jokes. He says, Trooper is your first love and I'm your second.
Oh, that's awesome.
But that's not true. But Pat is my first love, but Trooper is very close second to him.
Yeah. He's running in it. Tell me this and then I'll let you go. What's left on your bucket list?
Oh, gosh. Well, I am working on a documentary film right now. It's my first documentary film.
I saw that. That's amazing.
Yeah, the first Nepali woman to climb Mount Everest. So that's on my bucket list, to get this film made to honor this woman, because she had this dream to climb Mount Everest. She was a Sherpa, and she wasn't permitted to climb because they did not let women in Nepal climb, even though the Nepali government would let women from other countries climb. They wouldn't let women from their own country climb. So she had the courage to fight the government of Nepal for equal rights.
I love it.
And she broke through that glass ceiling for women in Nepal. And
oh my gosh.
Unfortunately, she took her 4 attempts to summit Everest. She made it on her 4th try, but unfortunately she did not survive the descent, and she died on the way down. So I really want to honor her legacy by getting this film made. So that's what I'm focused on right now.
I love that. I saw that. And congratulations. And that is very cool that you're doing that. It sounds like an incredible story. Well,
thank you.
We end with these rapid fire questions, and I want to just fire them off, and you've got to try to fire back as fast as you can. Okay, sister? You can rock it for me, all right?
Okay.
All right. So are you a morning person or are you a night person?
Night person.
Wow. All right. One word to describe yourself.
All night. My sweet spot, 11 p.m. to 2 a.m.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. Good for you. But golly, what are you doing from 11 to 2?
That's when I get my best work done.
Really?
That's when I get my best work done. Yeah. And then I sleep from 2 to 6 or 2 to 7.
Is that enough sleep for you?
No, but I sleep on planes too. I don't necessarily sleep at night. I just sleep when I can.
Got it. Okay. That sounds interesting.
Whenever that happens to be.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. Well, so tell me this. What is your biggest fear?
Losing my dog.
Wow. Okay.
Never been through that before. This is my first dog. And I started crying when he turned 3. And my husband was like, he's only 3. I think he's got a couple good years left. Why are you crying? I'm like, I don't want him to die.
Oh, my gosh.
So, I dread that.
Oh, okay. Wow. He sounds awesome. What's your favorite book?
Free to Be You and Me, Marlo Thomas. It was the first book that was you be you. Whoever you are, you just be you. And I love that book, even though I was probably 8 years old when it came out.
Oh my gosh. Okay. That's awesome. I love that. Who's a person that's made the biggest impact on your life?
My dad. He was a FBI agent, and he was the first special agent to publicly speak out against J. Edgar Hoover and the Bureau. He was an agent in the 60s under Hoover, and he was branded a crazy person and a threat to national security, and his career was ruined. And because Hoover was so powerful, and it wasn't until after Hoover died that they realized that everything my dad was saying was right. And then my dad was in Time Magazine and written up in all these books, but he was the first agent that ever spoke out against Hoover and the Bureau. He was in his late 20s, and he just thought Hoover was doing so many unethical things and should be called out on it. So he tried, and he paid the price professionally at the time, but refused to give up on trying to bring people's attention to all the bad things that Hoover was doing. So he was eventually vindicated after Hoover's death. But he taught me that when you see something that isn't right, you flag it, you make noise, you bring it to people's attention, you call people out on that, and no matter what, you go down swinging.
Wow, that's awesome. Your dad's a total stud.
He
Pretty
is
cool.
amazing. He's going to be 83 in a couple weeks.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So tell me this, what is your life motto?
My life motto is count on me. I really strive to be the person that is the clutch player that people can count on. When I tell you I'm going to do something, I do it. When I tell you I'm going to come through, I come through. People know that when they ask me to do something, it's going to get done. And so I just, that's my motto. Count
That's
on
a
me.
heck of a kind of teammate you want if you're climbing Everest, obviously.
Right.
What is your biggest inspiration?
My biggest inspiration, I would say, is Malala. Like I'm so inspired by Malala. Like this young girl who could go up against the Taliban.
Right.
My God, she got shot in the head and she lived. Like, so first of all, she's a miracle. She is a living miracle. But my God, when I think about gutsy, courageous people, you know, men or women, like this girl, she has so much courage. And so not just Malala, but also Malala's father. So if you watch interviews of her father, he talks about how the day she was born, he said, I looked at her and I just fell in love with her. He said, I fell in love with this little girl. And so for this man in Pakistan, where there's so, you know, there's so much anti-women sentiment, and he is, you know, look, Malala is an incredibly brave young woman, but he is so brave too, because he was willing to risk so much to, you know, educate his daughter and make sure that she had a great quality of life and make sure that, you know, she had, you know, the best possible future. And, you know, he's, I consider him a brave man too. Every father could look at their daughter, every parent, not just father, but every parent could look at their daughter and their sons, look at their kids and just say, I'm going to fight to make sure you have the best possible future. You know, to me, that's very inspiring.
Absolutely. Wow. She's a heck of a pick, girl. I love that you picked that, because we do this rapid fire on every one, and I haven't ever had anybody, have we, that hasn't answered that way. So, Alison Levine, you are a total and complete badass. Thanks for coming on. You're awesome. Thanks, as always, for listening. And if you missed an episode, you can listen to previous episodes on iTunes or on mollyfletcher.com. Until next time, stay curious and be bold.